Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Comfortable and Inclusive Outdoor Seating. My name is Ryan Colwell, and I will be the host for today's webinar. With me today is Chantel Pivotto, who is the design consultant at Graber, and who will be acting as our facilitator today. Today's panelists are Kaitlyn Ellerman and Larry Seiple. Kaitlyn is Graber's Northeast Regional Sales Manager, and Larry is the Midwest Sales Manager. They're kind enough to join us today to discuss ADA compliant seating in outdoor spaces and provide some great examples of accessible Thomas Steele products. But before I let them have the floor, I want to give everyone a brief overview of what you can expect to see covered here today. Firstly, we'll be defining what the ADA is and explaining what it regulates. Next, we'll examine the kinds of spaces that are regulated by the ADA and look at some of their general requirements. Then, we'll be diving into the specifics of outdoor seating, both the design requirements for furnishings as well as the amount of space needed for each furnishing. More specifically, we will be looking at the requirements for tables, picnic tables, and benches. As we do that, Kaitlyn and Larry will be providing some great examples of Thomas Steele products that meet these requirements. After that, we'll discuss some of the benefits of creating accessible spaces before finally having a live Q&A. So, if you have any questions about what we cover here today, please write them into the chat box below, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end as time allows. Now, without further ado, Kaitlyn, could you please tell us a bit about what the ADA is?
Sure, Ryan. The Americans with Disability Act, or ADA for short, is a law originally passed by the U.S. Congress and signed into law in 1990. It was created to protect the rights of people with disabilities and prevent discrimination against them in the areas of employment, government activities, transportation, commercial establishments, and many other aspects of American life. Since being introduced, the law has been amended several times, both to update pre-existing statutes as well as cover a variety of new statutes. For today's webinar, we will be focusing on the 2010 amendment, which updated Title III of the law. Title III deals with public accommodations and commercial facilities. Larry, could you talk a little bit about the types of spaces that are covered in Title III of the ADA?
Yes, I can, Kaitlyn. Broadly speaking, the ADA affects all indoor and outdoor public spaces. The law puts requirements in place to make sure that everyone can access public spaces, including privately owned establishments that are used by the public, such as restaurants, theme parks, hotels, and shopping centers. While compliance with the law is mandatory, there are some circumstances that may affect compliance in certain spaces. Let's look at some of these circumstances now. In the original 1990 version of the law, the ADA stated that an establishment built before 1992 did not have to comply with all regulations and could be grandfathered in without needing to change its design. The 2010 amendment, however, got rid of that clause, meaning all the facilities open to the public must be accessible. Instead, the law stated that the facility built before March 15, 2012 does not legally have to comply with the 2010 regulations and only has to be compliant with the original 1990 regulations under the Safe Harbor clause. Additionally, there are some flexibility in the law. So an establishment may not need to make drastic changes to consider the compliant. If, for example, complying with ADA regulations would cause an area to be fundamentally changed, such as having to pave a hiking trail or, from paving a hiking trail, then alterations did not need to be made. Similarly, if removing barriers would cause significant difficulties or cause someone to use extreme means, such as blasting rocks at a wilderness facility, then regulations do not need to be met. The same rule applies to any potential changes that would conflict with other laws, such as disturbing an endangered species habitat to try to make an area accessible. One last important note is that the need for the space to comply may be temporarily delayed if the size of the alteration would be unusually large or to be so costly that it would put the space deep in debt. This delay will not last forever, though. The space would need to eventually make alterations to become compliant. If you're unsure if your space fits into any of these categories or unsure if you need to make an alteration to be compliant, then I suggest you find a consultant to get an ADA audit. By far, the easiest way to avoid making changes would be to build a space with accessibility in mind from the beginning. Doing this not only saves you money, but also saves the stress of learning all the ADA laws while your establishment is open to the public. But you may ask, what does an accessible space even look like? To help answer this question, Kaitlyn, can you please help us out?
You bet, Larry. I want to start off by giving a brief definition of the word accessible. It's a word we'll be using a lot today, and I want everyone to understand what it means in this context. The Office of Disability Rights defines the word accessible as referring to a site, facility, work environment, service, or program that is easy to approach, enter, operate, participate in, and or use safely and with dignity by a person with a disability. It's important to know that there are no shades of accessibility. One space cannot be more or less accessible than another. Each space simply is accessible or it is not. The ADA states that an area is accessible only if all facilities, constructed features, and connecting routes are in full compliance with the applicable accessibility guidelines. Accessible refers only to specific facilities, constructed features, or routes that have been constructed or altered in compliance with all of the requirements of the applicable accessibility guidelines. Now let's look at some of those guidelines. Accessible spaces will include, but are not limited to, the following elements: designated parking spaces for people with disabilities, entrances that comply with ADA regulations, available ramps or elevators at places where levels change, bathrooms that are ADA compliant, and proper signage throughout an establishment. It should be noted that this list does not encompass all of what makes a space accessible, but instead just provides some basic examples of ADA requirements that an establishment must comply to. Now that we know some of the key aspects that determine if a space is accessible, let's look at the ADA requirements for site furnishings in those spaces. Larry, would you mind getting us started by telling us about tables?
I sure can, Kaitlyn. Let's start by discussing the ADA requirements for the dimensions of an accessible table. According to the ADA, the surface height of an accessible table will be no more than 34 inches and no less than 28 inches above the floor. When they say the surface, they're referring to the tabletop. In addition to the surface height, there are also table clearance requirements. The ADA defines it as at least 27 inches providing between the floor and the underside of the table. The knee clearance in width must be 30 inches minimum, and knee clearance in depth must be 19 inches minimum. There should be no obstructions, including table legs, in this clearance space. These requirements are all in place so that a person in a wheelchair can easily and comfortably sit at the table. It is important to note that ADA compliant often have 2 or 4 legs with 30 inches of clearance between them. A table with only one leg may not leave enough room for knee clearance. Because of the center post or the base, many courtyard style tables, even the ones that have a seat excluded for accessibility, can fall short of the ADA requirement if the table base extends on the floor and does not allow for 19 inches of clear space. Here at Thomas Steele, however, all of our 3-seat dining height courtyard tables are built to ADA compliant. We offer them in a variety of styles, so you have a choice of your choice of both the material we use as well as the design of the table. The best part about these tables is that you can view them on our website using our 3D configurator. This allows you to customize your perfect table online and see what it's going to look like in real time. Once you're done customizing it, you can then view the table in your own space with augmented reality. Another great accessible table option is our Walden Square table. The Walden Square table looks great. It is built to last, and like our courtyard tables, has seats that are attached to its base. For a Walden Square table to be compliant, you must choose either the 2 or 3-seat option, as Walden tables with 4 seats do not leave enough room for a person in a wheelchair to sit. Once you've chosen your favorite Thomas Steele table, it's important to know where and how to properly place a table for the ease of use and accessibility. First, make sure that you have clear floor space in the area around your accessible table. If your floors are not clear or cleared of obstructions, then you can become more dangerous tripping hazards and barriers. To prevent this, the ADA has regulated space to ensure that the area around an accessible table is significantly free of obstructions. The ADA states that there should be there should be an area of 30 inches by 48 inches of clear space at each accessible seating location. This ensures that there is enough room for someone to easily access their place at the table. Having this free space allows a person enough room to turn around, adjust a chair, and easily remove themselves if necessary. Accessible aisles are also important to consider when creating a layout for tables. An accessible aisle is a route from the barriers not allowing people with disabilities to reach accessible areas with ease. An accessible aisle is 36 inches wide, excluding the back of the seats and other obstructions. Proper spacing isn't the only important aspect of ADA compliance, however. An establishment must also have a certain number of accessible tables in their space. According to ADA guidelines, if the table provided by an establishment are attached to the wall or fixed to the floor, then 5% of those tables, or at least one if less than 20 are provided, must be accessible. The ADA guide for small business states that if it is not readily achievable to provide the minimal number of accessible tables in all areas where fixed tables are provided, then the service must provide another accessible location, if doing so is readily achievable. However, these alternate locations must be available for all customers, not just the people with disabilities. It is illegal to segregate people with disabilities in one area by designating it as an accessible area to be used only for people with disabilities. If possible, placing accessible seating throughout an outdoor area is best, as doing so both conforms to the law and creates a welcoming and inclusive environment for everyone. Now that we've looked at general regulations for tables, we can look at picnic tables specifically, which shares many of the same regulations, but have some additional requirements that are specific to them. Kaitlyn, can you go in more detail about the picnic tables?
I sure can, Larry. One of the differences for picnic tables is that 20% or at least 2 of the tables need to be accessible as opposed to just 1 for all other standard types of tables. The number of wheelchair spaces required in an accessible table is also different, as it is related to the surface perimeter of a picnic table. A clear space of 30 inches by 48 inches must be made available for each 24 linear feet of usable space around the perimeter of a tabletop. Generally, 1 space is required for tables up to 9 feet in length. Tables between 10 and 20 feet long usually require 2 wheelchair spaces, and longer tables will require more. Additionally, the accessible seat must be clear so that a wheelchair can fit into the space with a forward approach. The ADA has the same height and width requirements for individual picnic table seats as with our other standard tables, which includes knee clearance that must be at least 30 inches in width, 19 inches in depth, and 27 inches in height. The surface of a picnic table must also be between 28 inches and 34 inches above the ground. Picnic tables also have more specific requirements for knee and foot clearance. If a picnic table has an A-frame type legs, there must be at least 27 inches of clearance under the table at 8 inches of depth, and then 9 inches of toe clearance from the ground to the cross support. Here at Thomas Steele, we offer several great picnic table options that comply with all ADA requirements. Our accessible picnic tables include our Fairway, Walden Park, and our new Monona picnic table. The Fairway picnic table is a casual picnic table that adds comfort and style to any outdoor gathering space. Both the 6 and the 8-foot tables have a wheelchair accessible option, with one side of the table having a smaller bench to allow for wheelchair access. The Walden picnic table is another great choice. It fits in with a variety of settings and is also available as either an 8 or a 6-foot picnic table. The dining height table is accessible and can either be an 8-foot table with 6-foot seats or a 6-foot table with 4-foot seats. Both the Fairway and the Walden picnic tables are built around steel frames and come with your choice of either Ipe wood or recycled plastic tabletops and seats. Both table designs also feature freestanding bench seats, which will be mounted in the ground next to the table. The Walden Park picnic table, on the other hand, has benches that are connected to the table, made of bent steel tubing and available at either 6 or 8 feet. These park-style wood and steel picnic tables are also available in a wheelchair accessible configuration. And the final ADA compliant picnic table we're going to be looking at today is the new Monona picnic table, which is being revealed here for the very first time. This item will be part of our popular Monona series, which is a collection of quality, attractive, and durable site furnishings. So if you're looking to get a table as part of a matching collection, this is the perfect choice for you. As far as placement is concerned for picnic tables, the main difference between the regulations for them and tables in general is that accessible picnic tables require a clear ground space of 36 inches on all usable sides of the table, in addition to the clear ground space for the wheelchair. Now that we've gone over the criteria for accessible picnic tables, Larry, maybe you could go into the ADA regulations for benches and provide some suggestions of Thomas Steele products that would meet that requirement.
You bet, Kaitlyn, I can do that. Let's start off by saying that there are very little compliance requirements for benches. According to the ADA, benches should comply with Section 903 of the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design, only when they are placed in saunas and steam rooms, dressing, fitting, and locker rooms, also holding and housing cells. However, the United States Access Board revised draft guideline states where benches without tables are provided in a single location, at least 50%, but no fewer than one, shall have a seat height at the front edge of 17 inches minimum and 19 inches maximum above the floor or ground space. This means that while there is no specific limitations or regulations that are about the placement of benches, at least some benches in the spaces must be at the height requirement. Here at Thomas Steele, every bench we manufacture meets this minimal requirement. And while not a requirement, the Access Board also suggests that benches will be the most useful if they have a back support and armrest to assist in sitting and standing. This means that while not required, benches with backs and armrests are preferred for many people with mobility issues. While we do offer backless and armless benches at Thomas Steele, we also have a wide variety of benches that comply with the suggestion. Some examples of these inclusive benches would be our Monona, Walden, Langdon, and Arcadia benches, as well as many others. They are built with steel and made to last the tough outdoor weather conditions. With the variety of different styles we offer, there are benches for any and every outdoor seating and style. And while there are only minimal ADA requirements for freestanding benches, we encourage everyone to create outdoor seating options that are accessible to all. When placing benches, consider providing clearance space next to the bench so a person in a wheelchair can sit side by side with their companion. Similarly, we suggest that you pull bench seating with back support and armrests so that people can safely and slowly help themselves into and off of the benches without risk of injury. By doing so, you are not only creating a safer environment, but you're also creating one in which more people feel welcome into the space. And this has many positive benefits. Kaitlyn, can you please go into detail about how creating inclusive spaces can be beneficial for everyone?
Yes, Larry. As you said, there are many benefits to creating an accessible space. Most importantly, as you mentioned, it helps create a warm, inviting area where all people can feel welcome. According to the CDC, approximately 1 in 4 Americans is classified as having a disability or some sort of mobility issue. By creating a space that everyone can enjoy, you not only increase the number of patrons you receive, but also increase the likelihood of repeat visitors. Creating an accessible space also assists the growing elderly population, many of whom are people with disabilities themselves. By creating a safe environment for them to spend their time, you make a further positive impact on your community. Another reason why creating an accessible space is great is because it increases your pool of potential employees. Although Section 3 of the ADA only applies to the public areas of establishments, creating a location that is holistically accessible means that you have a larger pool of candidates and an environment where everyone feels safe at work. Lastly, because ADA is the law, having a non-accessible space could potentially lead to your establishment having legal issues. Becoming compliant prevents this, and additionally, if you are a small business, you may qualify for a tax credit.
Great. Thank you both so much for all that useful information. I see that we have a bunch of questions coming in. So at this time, I'd like to pass over to Chantel and maybe you can ask you guys some questions.
Great. Kaitlyn, I'll have you answer this first question. It is, can you help me plan my space?
Yes, we certainly can. We do have engineers and designers here that can lay out the space with the adequate ADA requirements between the tables and benches, and give you a better idea of the space with, how many picnic tables, how many benches, to really utilize and maximize your space.
All right, and then Larry, can custom furnishings be made to meet the specific requirements of my town?
Yeah, if you have special requirements you need that are above and beyond the minimum requirements, yeah, we can customize it. We can work with you on making sure the dimensions you need are appropriate, and then our engineers can design a bench that will fit those needs to help your community be able to sit appropriately and comfortably.
Great. Kaitlyn, can courtyard tables come with 2 seats?
Good question. Yes, they can. All of our courtyard tables available on our website do come in a 2-seat option. It may not be available on the website, but please reach out to us. We'd be happy to get you pricing and drawings for the 2-seat option.
Larry, what are our current lead times?
Right now on our Thomas Steele products, we are looking at 12 to 13 weeks for all of our Power Code Thomas Steele furnishings.
Okay. Kaitlyn, do temporary outdoor dining areas created for COVID need to conform?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say yes, they do need to conform, as even if they are temporary, they are considered outdoor dining areas and need to follow the ADA guidelines that Larry and I spoke about today.
All right, and last question. Larry, do you know where or how I can get an ADA audit?
Yeah, a quick Google search. If you search for a in-person ADA audit, you should be able to find a list of some people in your local area that could come out to your site, review it, and make sure that it does meet the requirements, the minimum requirements for ADA.
All right, and it looks like I do have one more question to go along with lead times. If either one of you wants to answer, is there a different lead time for wood or recycled plastic products? No,
those lead times that Larry mentioned, the 12 to 13 weeks, would include the benches and picnic tables that have the Ipe wood or the recycled plastic.
Okay, great. Thank you everyone for attending. It was great to have you all back this month. Thank you, Kaitlyn and Larry, for presenting for us, and thank you for Chantel for helping out. Everyone can expect a follow-up email coming out later today that'll give all the slides that you saw in today's presentation, as well as a recording of the video. So thank you again, and we hope to see you at the next one.